Right, so today I want to talk about this tweet from Steven Crowder and the general idea behind it mainly. And he says the right to something is not the same as the right to force someone else to pay for it. Now, when it comes to rights in general, this is something that people get wrong, I think just through pure stupidity, but when it comes to rights, whether or not something is a right, um, the first thing that it would depend on is if having said right depends on forcing someone else to do something, then it's not a right. Like it's not a right, right? Like, healthcare, not a right because it depends on you forcing doctors and nurses to provide care paid for by someone else. And here's the thing too, like when it comes to this kind of stuff, like I would at least, not treat these people like they're purely insane if they were actually honest about the fact. Like, if they said, healthcare is a human right, I'm going to take them a lot more seriously if they say, I don't want to have to pay for my own healthcare. I want to force other people to do it. Like I would take them a lot more seriously if they said it the other way around, because if they said it, the wanting to force other people to pay for it, at least they're being honest, right? But this idea that it's free is complete bunk. I mean, you look at Alberta, like over half our budget goes to healthcare. So the idea that it's quote unquote free is absolute insanity. But the point being is that the people who advocate for this system the most are almost exclusively, obviously there's always exceptions to rules, but they're overwhelmingly people who it benefits financially from having it that way. Like these are people that are incredibly unhealthy usually, or they're people that are very poor, right? Because I mean, here's the other thing too. Even if you're poor, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a private option. Because if you're poor and you're healthy, your premiums would still be very low, right? Like under a private system, um, the cost of your health care depends entirely on the amount, your likelihood of getting sick, and your past, um, claims, right? So if you're someone who, yeah, you've been to the doctor, once in the last decade, and it's because you cut yourself cutting vegetables, or you broke your arm or something, yeah, your premiums are going to be next to nothing. But if you're someone who has diabetes, you're on, 10 different types of medication, you have, and you're in your 30s or your 40s, well, you're going to be paying a heck of a lot more. The problem being is that the person on diabetes who's on 10 different types of medication in their 30s or 40s, well, they don't want to have to pay for that themselves. And I mean, here's the other thing too, is that these people always accuse mainly people on the right of, oh, you guys are just greedy. You don't want to pay more. You don't want to give people free stuff because you're greedy. No, it's not that. It's largely just the fact that these people are projecting. And this is the thing when it comes to political discussions as a whole, is that the first thing you need to figure out when it comes to political discussions and debates is the other person projecting, and am I projecting? Because oftentimes that's the case, right? Like, I strongly believe that when it comes to taxing people more and giving people free healthcare, it's largely just projection. And I mean, there's many ways of knowing. Is number one, if these people actually, I mean, especially the rich, like the richer people that are on the left, the only way that they deserve to be taken seriously is if they're already voluntarily paying more in taxes or donating a lot of money to charity. And the fact that the vast majority of these people aren't just goes to show they're not being genuine, right? Like it's just when it comes to celebrities, I think it's more of a guilty conscience in that they're rich and they view all these poor people, and it's just a guilty conscience complex. So the way they, rather than actually doing good, they just simply vote. And I mean, this is the devil's bargain that we have these days, is that people think by simply checking a box every 3, 4, 5 years, provincially, federally, wherever, that somehow that relieves them of guilt. That all they got to do is go check the box and they've done their part. And you really haven't, because what about if the person you check the box for doesn't actually do what they say? Are you gonna vote them out? Well, no. Most of the time, people don't. Right? And that's the problem, is that people think that just checking the box is all you need to do these days, and that really isn't. Because what you need to do is actually once you check the box, you need to make sure that the policy they implement actually works. The problem is the vast majority of people don't do that because all they care about is the emotional aspect behind it. Giving people free healthcare is caring for the poor, right? Giving people welfare is caring for the poor. They don't care if welfare is just a total Ponzi scheme to keep most people poor and to keep them dependent upon the policies and the same kind of people that they voted for in the first place. They don't care about that. They care about dealing with the guilty conscience. So again, and here's the thing, like the way that you can tell, like getting back to the main point, the way something is a right is if you don't need to interfere with someone else's freedom to have said right, right? Like free speech, gun rights. Now again, right, I know we don't have that in Canada. I mean, we don't really have free speech either, but those are examples of things that are rights, right? Like the right to be presumed innocent. Again, that's another right. Um, the right to free healthcare isn't a right because again, you have to take money from other people and take resources from other people to get it. That's like literally like me saying that um, you know going out to dinner once a week or once a month, that's a right. Or a new car every 5 years or 4 years, whatever, that's a right. No, that's literally the same thing as saying the whole healthcare thing, because nowadays you pretty much, unless you live really close to your work, and the vast majority of people need a car to survive. I mean, especially, I mean, if you're an adult, but um, you need a car. You need to eat. But does that mean that it's a right? Well, no, it isn't, because it's. I mean, there's other aspects of it too. I know people say, "What about this? What about that?" But um, in a nutshell, something isn't a right if you have to take resources from other people at the point of a gun to get it. Like it's not a right. And people say, I mean, you look at it in the comments too: clean air, clean drinking water. Well, um, you can control a lot of that yourselves, right? So again, that's kind of a not a fair argument. And I mean, here's the thing too: is that if you want to disagree, well, fine. The problem is you can't really have it either way, right? Like either rights are something that can't be just arbitrarily applied, or they can. But the minute you make it like that, what happens if a conservative, some ultra religious guy gets in and is like, paying for churches is a human right? Or what about that? What about paying for religious schools is a right? Like, and forces people to pay for it, right? So that's the problem. Like that's the problem, that either rights are something to where you can't force other people to provide it at the point of a gun, and that they're inalienable, or they aren't, right? Like you can't have it both ways. Now, I think it's very obvious you need to have it the way that it's inalienable, but if you want to have it the other way around, this is the other problem too, that these people are the same kind of people that'll complain when someone they disagree with politically proposes something, having a gun, being not the taxpayer funded guns and ammo, that's a right. Even it's in the Constitution, right? But again, that's not a right. You only have the right to own a gun if you provide said resources to buy and whatnot, right? So this idea that it's you know having a computer, having the government buy everybody a computer or a smartphone, that's a right, because again, free speech. But again, it's not a right because you have to force other people to pay for it, right? Like free speech is a right, but you don't have the right to force other people to pay so you can exercise said free speech, right? Same thing with guns. So, and the fact that we even have to discuss this is absolutely insane. But given where we're at these days politically, it's not that surprising. So, anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. So if you'd like to, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you follow me on Twitter mainly, also BitChute and Parler, but mainly Twitter. Those links are in the description, so you can find them there.